Okay, so let me introduce myself. I'm Amelia Merced. I am originally from Puerto Rico. I did my PhD in Illinois. That's why part of my presentation will have some bryophytes of Illinois or Southern Illinois. Um, and I am currently working at the International Institute of Tropical Forestry, that is part of the USDA Forest Service. And I'm also working at the herbarium of the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras. And if you don't know what a herbarium is, I will talk a little bit about it. Okay, so for tonight, I'm gonna tell you about these amazing, very small plants that are called the bryophytes. What are they? Their general characteristics, how are they classified, why are they important, and in there I'm going to tell you a little bit about the research that I've been doing in the last few years, and then some ideas of how to identify bryophytes in the field. And what this means with bryophytes are how to look at mosses and liverworts, or the most common of them. And I will end with some resources so that you can also enjoy looking at bryophytes. So what are bryophytes? Well, they are small plants, and they are, when we talk about bryophytes, we talk about these three groups of plants known as the mosses, the liverworts, and the hornworts. And currently, they are think that they are sisters to each other, so they are related. And they also related to Tracheophyte. Tracheophyte is just a name for plants that have larger plants like ferns and flowering plants and seed plants like the conifers. So Tracheophytes are all the plants that you usually look at when you go out, and the bryophytes are the small plants such as the mosses and the liverworts. And what makes them different from the Tracheophyte is that the plant that you actually see, the small, let me get my laser pointer here. Okay, so the green part that you see usually growing near the surface, that is called a gametophyte, and that is a plant that lives longer and is the plant that produces the gametes. Then when you see a structure like this one, that is the sporophyte, and the sporophyte's whole purpose in life is to produce spores, and the spores are the way that bryophytes disperse or they reproduce. So they make spores to grow in different places. So we have, as in other plants, we have two generations, but in this case, the generation that is long-lived and that is doing all the work, all the photosynthesis is the gametophyte. And then you have the small sporophyte that only lives for a season and only produce spores. So when we think about Tracheophytes, on the other hand, it is the sporophyte, the main plant. So together, the bryophytes, as I said, they're small plants. They grow on surfaces, and they have a gametophyte that is long-lived and photosynthetic. They have a sporophyte that depends on the gametophyte and is short-lived. And they need water to reproduce. And actually, as all plants need water, bryophytes have a special relationship with water, because when water is available, bryophytes can live and can photosynthesize. But when there is no water, they just dry up and wait until water is available again. And they disperse by spore. In the world, there are around 20,000 species. And when you think about mosses, or liverworts or bryophytes in general, you don't think that there are so many, but they are actually the second largest group of plants. So there are more species of bryophyte than they are of conifers or pines. So let's look at the life cycle of a bryophyte. And as I said, that they have spores and they reproduce by spores. When you see a plant like this, you have the gametophyte and the sporophyte. The sporophytes will make spores. The spores will germinate into a protonema, and that protonema will then become the gametophyte or the gametophytic plant. And this plant will have, in the case of mosses, it will have leaves or something that looks like leaves, but they are not true leaves. And they will also have structures that look like roots, but they are not roots. Bryophytes do not have true roots or true leaves. They only have rhizoids or small structures to hold in place. So they don't really use this for water. They use it to stay put in the place where they are. And then, so they do have eggs and sperm. And when the egg and the sperm come together, they form an embryo or a sporophyte that will grow and become this other part. Okay? And as I said before, the difference between other plants is that the gametophyte, it's the most or the largest part that you're gonna see, the long-living part of the plant. Okay, so when we think about bryophytes, we have three groups. Most of you probably have heard about mosses and have seen mosses before. If you go out in the spring, they're probably the only green plants that, or winter, they're probably the only green plants that are in rocks or around the trails. So the mosses have a leafy gametophyte. That means that they have structures that look like leaves, and the sporophyte is a capsule. So this is the first thing that you're gonna do when you look at them, is to try to differentiate between the three of them. So mosses, you're gonna see leaves, and sporophytes that have a capsule and a seta. For liverworts, you can have two types. You can have leafy liverworts, like this one. It doesn't really show the leaves in there, but they are there, and they are like this in one plane. So because that one is growing towards us, we can't really see it. And then we have the thalloid liverworts. That is a way of growing that is like a ribbon. So this kind of liverworts grows really close to the rocks or to the soil where it's growing. And again, the sporophyte is also a capsule and a seta. And why do I make the point of finding sporophytes and gametophyte is because you can usually identify a plant with only the gametophyte or the green part. But if you have the sporophyte, it helps you better identify it. And also it's really fun when you're just used to looking at the vegetative part or the gametophyte, and then suddenly you find a sporophyte. It's like, yay, I found it. So then the other group, which is really not that common, and maybe you've not heard about it before, is the hornworts. And it is because there are very few species of hornworts around the world, maybe around 150 to 200 species of hornworts. So they're really rare. But if you find them, you're gonna probably see something like this. You're gonna have a dark green thalloid or tallows that is kind of like a ribbon or maybe circular, and they're usually dark green. And then the sporophyte is a cylinder that looks like that. So it doesn't make a capsule on the end, it's just spores all the way up. So this one is maximizing the way it's making spores. Okay,
Amelia, real quick, we have some questions.
Yes.
Could you define the terms seta and thalloid real quick?
Thank you. Okay. Seta,
Seta.
yeah, it's the stalk that is holding the capsule.
Okay.
So in this case, this will be the seta, and this will be the capsule. Yeah, great point. Thalloid or thallus, it's a structure, it's a way of growing that is similar to a ribbon. So it's flat. When we're talking about a thallus or thalloid, thalloid will mean that the form is in the shape of a thallus. It's like a flat organ, and I usually call it like a ribbon. But these are some of the important terms that we use in Bryophyte.
All right.
Any
And
other questions? Yes.
just two more quick ones. Are lichen liverworts?
Oh, that's a great question. No, lichens are not liverworts. Lichens are an association between fungi and an algae. So when we go out in the field, I wish I could just skip to that part. You're gonna find things that look like bryophytes or that look like mosses or liverworts, and they are not. So I'm gonna a little bit further. I'm gonna tell you about that.
Interesting. And then someone else, real quickly, just wants to have you point out with your laser pointer where the sporophyte on the hornwort is.
Yes.
Just real quick.
Excellent. Yeah. So you have, so the dark green here is the gametophyte, and then the sporophyte is the entire structure that looks like a column or a cylinder. So all of this, so if you see here, and this is a good point, because to find them, this is the easiest way to look for this. So these structures that are yellow at the end, that means that the spores in this region are mature, while the ones down under are green. So, and just like this, you're probably gonna find it around some grasses or other stuff. So they're hiding. I always feel like finding bryophyte is like looking for treasures.
All
So
right.
did I answer those questions?
Yep, that is it for now. I'll let you know if we have any others.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, so so why are bryophytes important? And I'm wondering if any of you have gardens and have grown orchids or carnivorous plants. You probably, this is actually from the Missouri Botanical Garden. I took this picture. So when you go to, they don't have a specific section for bryophytes, but if you go to the section for carnivorous plants, you're gonna see the bryophyte, and this one is one of the handsome ones. That one down here, this is a carnivorous plant, and this other is a carnivorous plant, and this is some other plant growing in there. So why are bryophytes important? I study them and I'm interested in them because, as I told you before, they are believed to be sisters to the earliest land plant. So it's like looking into the past on how plants evolve and how plants became the way they are. So that's why I'm interested in them. But also they have important ecological roles. Bryophytes retain humidity and capture water from the atmosphere. So you know that most plants have to wait for water to, to rain and then go down to the roots so they can get the water. Bryophytes just get the water out directly from their leaves and from all the other, or tallows. They'll get the water directly from the environment. So that means that they can take water from the clouds in the cloud forest. They are a microhabitat for animals and for other plants. So you can imagine bryophytes as small or miniature forests So if you will have like super great vision, you could go in and see what it's living inside a bryophyte, and you can have tardigrades that I believe they're called water bears, and other very small animals that live in there. So for them, this is a forest, just like the forest is a forest to us, which is really interesting. Also, it can help other plants to germinate. So seeds that fell in bryophyte mats or in moss mats, they can grow and germinate. And they are pioneers in ecological succession. And they have a lot of things in common with lichens because they are kind of in the same scale. And that is one of them. Now, for me, one of the most important one is this plant that we have here. They are important in capturing and storing carbon. So you know that we have CO2 in the environment. Plants during photosynthesis, what they do is they take that carbon and they put it inside them. They build themselves. So there is one particular genus, Sphagnum, that are frequently found in peatlands. And although they only occupy 3% of the land, they hold about 30% of terrestrial carbon. So they are a carbon sink. And what happens is that these plants might be okay and alive on top, and then the bottom is just holding all that carbon. Okay, so I'm gonna move on, tell you a little bit about some of the bryophytes of Puerto Rico and some of the work that I've been doing in Puerto Rico. Okay, so disappointingly, we only have 500 species of bryophytes in Puerto Rico. We have about 280 mosses and 230 liverworts and only 5 hornworts. And when we compare that to North America, the flora of North America has a lot of more bryophytes than in Puerto Rico. So even when we are, and maybe I should have said this at the beginning, but Puerto Rico is an island in the tropics, so you will normally expect to have like, wow, this great diversity just because it's in the tropic. Well, good news for you, in the non-tropical area, mosses at least are as diverse as they are in the tropical areas. So you can call North America a hotspot in some way of species of bryophytes. So going back to what the species of North America look like, you have about 1,400 species of mosses, and from those, about 19% are endemic to North America. And what that means is that those of all those mosses, a lot of them only occur, or 20%, about 20% of them only occur in North America and nowhere else in the world. And that is something to be happy about and to try, you know, a motivation to learn more about them. Okay. In the world, we have about 20,000 species. And as you can see, most of them are mosses. And then they are followed up by liverworts and then just a few hornworts. So the diversity of bryophytes, and a lot of people maybe talk only about mosses, and I try to talk about the 3 groups together. A lot of the diversity of bryophytes, it's dispersed around the world. So in different parts, you can find bryophytes. Now, the work that I've been doing here, I will classify it in 4 different areas: floristics, ecology, conservation, and education. In the floristic side, what I'm calling floristic is just doing inventories or looking at what species are where. And for that, this is an area that anybody can contribute to. Because if you get to know what are the species, then whenever you go to a place, you can learn what is there. In ecology, I will tell you a little bit about how species decide where to live or what are their preferences. And then the conservation and education goes together. And I think this goes really well with the mission of the Audubon Society about, getting to know your surroundings so that you can help preserve it and use it wisely. Um, so Okay, so here is a view on top of the rainforest, El Yunque rainforest of Luquillo Mountains after the hurricane, or a couple of years after the hurricane. And this is represent one of the habitats that I go. So it's a rainforest, and there are a lot of epiphytes. Epiphytes are plants that grow on other plants. And here we have some tree ferns and palms. These are palms from the forest. These are not the ones that you find at the beach. And then we have here, this is another amazing ecosystem. This is in the coast, and this is Laguna Tortuguero, and it's an area that is like a coastal forest. So everything that you find is short trees or shrubby plants growing in there. And then very different from this habitat, we're gonna find the mosses or the bryophytes hiding in the shade of these plants or as soil crust that you can see here with those dark spots. So those dark spots have a combination of different things, and some of them might be bryophytes. So in this area, what I do, and usually have students or other people, friends helping, it's going to the places and make collections and then do checklists of bryophytes for those locations. Then the specimens are deposited in the herbarium. And a herbarium is like a library, but instead of books, you have plants. You have dried plants. And for bryophytes, there are different ways of doing it. You can have, in the case that we have in our herbarium in Puerto Rico, you have these small packages, and then those packages are organized in drawers. Again, this is going to vary how they do it in different herbaria. But in our herbarium, we keep them in these small packages with a label, with their name, who collected them. And this one in particular is really old. This is from an expedition from the New York Botanical Garden from 1889. So this specimen is over 100 years old. And when you open it, this is what you find. You find the specimen, which is the dried plant. And this dried plant helps us first learn what the name of the plants signifies, or what do they mean with the name of the plant, how it should look like. So this is like a reference that this plant should look like this, and in terms of not physically, but you have to go and look at it under the microscope. So for all of this, I use microscopes. I use dissecting and compound microscope to identify the plants. Okay, so our collections are stored there for other people to use.
I have a couple of quick questions, Amelia, real quick. First off is actually from Serenella. She's asking, are mosses more common on temperate regions than tropics, or is that just true for North America?
Great question. for mosses in particular, so for a lot of plants you have a latitudinal gradient where you have more species in the tropics, like that's for flowering plants and other things. For mosses in particular, there is no gradient. There's a lot of species in I will say temperate zones and tropical zones. Now, if you go higher up to the Arctics and other types of environment, you have less. Also, the other thing is that in humid places, you probably find more species than other. So even if I said North America, if you compare the desert with the Smoky Mountains, for example, you have a big variation in the number of species. So you're gonna find more species in places that are humid.
All right, great. And then ones specific to the herbarium specimens, do the dried plants disintegrate over time? Obviously, that 1889 one doesn't look too bad for being 140 some years old.
That this is one of the amazing things of plants, and I love herbarium. That was my first job as a student. Herbariums can hold specimens for a really long time. So dry conditions, they can last hundreds of years. They will degrade if and this is for all plants, not only bryophytes, if insects get into the collection. So yeah, you can rehydrate them and the spores can be viable. It depends on the species, which ones are viable or not. Usually they can survive 5 years, but it depends a lot. You can grow mosses that have been dead or have been sleeping for a really long time. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. And that is it for now.
Okay, perfect. And okay, so then the other ones, I was looking at, I'm gonna just go fast through this so I can get to the part that you probably want to know about. So with a student last year, we were looking at the habitat preferences of two bryophytes in the rainforest, and they are Tuidium, is this one here, this moss, and Plagiochyla, this one here. And what we found is that they, for Tuidium specifically, it likes better to be near the rivers. While the liverwort Plagiochyla, it didn't really matter that much if it was in the river. We have these two bryophytes. We have the moss and the liverworts, and they have different preferences on where they would like to live. Okay, next slide. Then another of the studies that that I was involved is looking at this miniature orchid Lepanthes. And this one occurs in Puerto Rico in different forests. And what is interesting about them is that they grow on a map of bryophytes. So if you look at the base of where the grid is, that little grid, those are bryophytes. So this study, we were looking at what does this orchid need for the orchid to germinate and grow and survive. And it seems like they need the map of bryophytes. And again, look at how small that orchid is. If you see there's in the corner, there's a 2 millimeters, that's the size of the grid. So this miniature orchid has a special relationship with the bryophyte, with the moss. Okay, next slide. Then we look at another important plant, and this one is sphagnum. I'm gonna try to open, I'm gonna turn on my camera to see, so you can see my face. So this orchid, this moss, sphagnum, it grows only in two areas of Puerto Rico. It's in the elfin forest, so in the cloud forest, and it grows in the soil. And it's hard to see it here in the picture of the right on top. There are some sphagnum growing on the soil in there. And this is a very important species for carbon storage. Where you find it usually is near rivers or near places where there is water running. And what is interesting about this one is that there used to be 3 species in Puerto Rico. But because of development of the coastal areas, those species have been removed and disappear. So again, we have some herbarium specimens at the right with the name of, of the species that are no longer with us. And these are from, again, from the 1900s or the late 1800s. Okay, next slide. Then the last one, and you can go click through them, it's that I want to develop an interpretative trail for bryophytes. And that is in El Yunque. We're trying to develop this guide, and this is the part of the educational side, where you can do ecotourism with hand lens. And what this means is that you can bring your hand lens and have a small guide similar to the one that is showing down here. And that guide will tell you features that you can see in the field when you go out, so you can identify the plant. And for me, the most important part is to learn to appreciate them. Maybe not necessarily learning all of their names or what they are or what they do, but at least appreciate their beauty. And if you see that one over there that is shown in the lower side, it has very delicate leaves. And bryophytes are really beautiful when you look at them closely. So that is what this project is about. And we had this was a couple of summers ago, we had some students looking at bryophyte. And one of the challenge that we had is, like, as you can see, you have to go and need to look in the floor or get close in different places to see the bryophyte. So that is also a challenge that I'm still confronting, is how can you appreciate these plants without destroying them, without having to pluck them out. Okay, next slide. Aha, bryophyte identification. So what do you need to do if you want to go out and become a bryophyte lover? So my suggestion is to have a hand lens. That would be very useful. You need to have, probably will be useful to have a guide, a book, or a species key. And you need your observational skills. And I think it's a great activity for all ages. Here are some friends of mine in a bryological survey type. This is in Tennessee. And yeah, as you can see, Karen is down in the floor. Kyle is here sitting, looking at the plant, while Christine is looking, just bending, looking at the plant. So we try not to pluck them, but if you have to do it, just take a little piece from the outside of the patch. Okay, so that's why I suggest to be careful. And here I have my hand lens. Okay, this is one of them. And next slide. Okay, so hand lens, what do I mean? I mean like a magnifying glass or a loupe. And if you like to go out and you see birds, you probably use your binoculars. If you're looking for wildflowers, ferns, fungi, and bryophytes, you use magnifying glasses. So the recommendation is to use a 10x. That's my favorite. I have 2 choices in there that are, if you can point at them, the 10x are the 2 big ones. And I like that one a lot because, as you can see, view area is larger than the other 10x. And when you're looking for a hand lens or a loop, one of the things that you want to make sure is that the glass is good so that it helps you look at things. If you see the one in the middle, it shows you that only the center of the of the loop of the glass is in focus. So you're always gonna see this surrounding that is out of focus. But the idea is the better loop you have, the smaller is that area. Okay, and then I'm gonna jump again to the 20x in the corner. That is the little baby one here, everybody. Uh, and I don't know if you can see me in the camera too. I have them both. And that is really small, and it's helpful for looking at characters of the leaves of bryophyte, because as I said, mosses have leaves and liverworts too. So, but that one is really not that necessary. I barely use it. I mostly use the 10x. So another thing that you have to make sure is that you have enough light. Some hand lenses come with an extra light that you can put in them, and you can see better the area. Okay, next slide. Oh, before I went, well, it's okay. If you want to identify to species, like if you want to do a survey and have a list of all the species, you need more tools. I'd say observation versus identification. Observation is going out, appreciate them and observe them, and maybe come with a preliminary idea but for a lot of identification, you will need dissectings and compound microscopes, tweezers, and then other equipment related to that. Okay, next. Okay, so how do you go out and find bryophytes? And this one, I believe, is from Arizona, this image here. And this is in the spring. No, this is in the fall, actually, or August. But what you're gonna look for are greens and shades of green. So when you go out and you scan the area and you look for colors of green. And what I'd like to think about, it's light green, dark green, brownish green. If you see over the rocks, you can see even some reddish. And you look for specific habitats. For example, tree trunks, boulders, rocks, the soil. If there's a creek or a river, those are perfect places to find bryophytes. Okay, next. Okay, yeah. So you're gonna also search for shape, color, and texture. That's why I said this is like a hunt, where you go and you have to search for this thing. So shape, color, and texture, and we're talking about the entire mat or the entire group of bryophyte, it will give you a better idea of what the species is. So sometimes from far away, if you see a special type of grown, you can look at and see what it is. You can probably identify it. So the first thing is look around for those particular, we call them microhabitat, or particular places where they grow. So it's like looking an overview. Then when you find them, you go get closer and look really close. And then you have to ask yourself, can you see it on your bare eye, or do you need a hand lens? If you need, and if you are using one, does it have leaves, or is it taloid or like a ribbon? And to use the hand lens, what you do is, I usually just put it really close to my eye and then move myself up and down or move the specimen. But I've learned from those summer students that what they do is they have the specimen and then they put the hand lens. Oh, I have my hand lens here. They put their hand lens really close to the specimen, and then they move back and forward and can see it. So there is ways of coming around using a hand lens. So Yeah, correct. Okay, so next slide. Now, anytime is a great time for bryophytes. And this one is from Illinois, and this was January. Of course, not everybody has winters like that, but in warm days of winter, you can see the green patches, especially, when it's, those first few warm days where the ice is melting. In fact, there are some mosses in there that were under the ice. So during winter, what they do is they dry up and they wait until it's warm or water is available. So when water is available, they can photosynthesize again and they can come back to life. Okay, next. Okay. So the great thing about going during different times of the year is that you can see the reproductive structures. Again, there's sporophytes. So in the first image that you have there to the left, it's a moss, and those are the sporophytes. You can see, yeah, the capsule and the seta. The seta is dark. All right, let's see if they're, yep. And then the top at the end, there is the capsule, and that's where the spores are gonna be. And if you've seen this, if you've been outside, you've probably seen this. And they wait an entire winter. So in spring, they can release the spores. So at different times, you can see different stages. And then on the right, it's a liverwort with all of those sporophyte. And that, for me, that was when I found that, I was really, because I've never seen so many. And that one, again, is in, these two are in Illinois. So the question that you were asking are, what are not bryophytes? So maybe you have seen something like this, where you have a patch, and I believe this is in early spring, where you have these patches of green carpets or carpets or turf, and they are different colors and different shades. That's what I said, look for color, look for shape. But then between them, there is this other thing that is not a bryophyte, and those are the lichens. And you can find lichens like this, the beer moss, the reindeer moss, and they are lichens. And another thing that is kind of disappointed, I don't use common names, which I'm sorry about that. I thought about it, but I'm not used to using them. We don't have them in Spanish. So, but at least I can give you some moss that are not moss. So Spanish moss and Irish moss, these are flowering plants. They are not mosses. Club moss, snake moss, and spike moss, these are lycophytes. They are not mosses. And beard moss and reindeer moss are lichens and are not mosses. So things that are not bryophytes are things like algae, fungi, and lichens. And how would you know the difference? I said, look at the color. So if it's green, light green to dark green to brownish to reddish, it's probably a bryophyte. And then again, if you can see that it has leaves, or then it's probably a bryophyte. Okay. Okay, so this is just to give you an idea of how diverse the mosses are. So when you look for mosses, what you're gonna have are spirally arranged. They have various shapes. So you have leaves, so things that look like leaves. They can have a mid vein or a costa, like that example. And they are green to whitish to green. So again, you can look on the right of that picture, there are all the different types of leaves. So there's a lot of variation, and you can see it when they are, when you look at them with a hand lens. Okay, next. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you some of the very cool mosses that you can find around. in the coastal plains or in areas that are wetlands, you can find sphagnum. This is a very important plant and very beautiful. And one of the things that I really love is the different shades of colors. There's a lot of species of sphagnum, and in Northeast America, there's a lot of them. And there are keys to identify them. Okay, but what makes them different from the other one is the way that they grow. If you see, they have like a little, I don't know, I think they look like puppies, like little dogs. They have like this head, and then they are growing, they're like kind of elongated at the bottom, which is hard to see in the image, maybe in the image of the right, the one that is standing up. See that one. So that will be the head or the capitula, and then if you go down, it has like, it looks like a flower, like a stalk. That's the rest of the plant, just growing like that. So it has like that straight stem, and then at the top it has a lot of little stem or little branches, making a head or a capitula. Okay, let's go to the next. Then in the mosses, we have two groups, the acrocarps and the pleurocarps. The acrocarpus mosses, these are the ones that grow straight up. And if you want to identify shapes and differences, this is one of the things to look at, whether the moss is growing laying down or if it's growing up. And here are some examples of some common mosses of North America and of the Northeast. You got atricum, and that red thing is some of the reproductive structure. They look like flowers, but they are not flowers. Then you have Pleionium, that is between those clover leaves. It's a little bit larger. And then in the bottom, you have Bartramia or apple moss. That is also relatively common to find, and it has a capsule that is, it looks like an apple. It's rounded completely when it's green. Then you have some other mosses that are really big, like Polytrichum. Well, when I say really big, I mean like this big with this Bryophyte. Big is different for Bryophyte than for other plants. So Polytrichum is a relatively big plant and really elegant plant too. So it grows really straight up with their leaves around. So when you look at the leaves, they're really pretty. And then the cranum on the right. And for me, that looks like a cat or like any sort of other animal. And I do like to touch it and feel it because it's really soft. So, okay, next, let's talk about now the other groups of mosses. The pleurocarps. And this ones in general, they grow as mats. No, they're not really tall. They're just like spread out. And some of the common ones is that Tweedium at the top. And that one, it's really pretty. It looks like a miniature fern. And I believe it's relatively common in the area. Yep, that one, Tweedium. Then in the bottom, you have one that looks similar. It's also like branch. And in contrast to the acrocarp mosses, the pleurocarps are really branched. They have a lot of branches, so they have this diverse branches around. And Hypnum is really pretty. This one in here, it has the leaves in a curve. Maybe it's hard to see it in there, but it also like it looks like furry like that, and it has all the leaves. Sometimes you have mosses with the leaves, just all of them in the same direction. Then we have this other relatively, the other two are Bryoandersonia. This one is found in North America and North Carolina. And that one it's also has, it has the leaves really packed together. So it's hard to see the leaf because they are all close together. In contrast to the hymnon that has the leaves away from the stem, the Brio andersonia have the leaves all very close to the stem. And then at the bottom you have Climasium, and there are other mosses that look like that. They are dendroid. That means that they grow kind of like a tree. So they are a little bit taller and they have kind of a stem, and then they diversify. Okay, let's go to the next. And I think now we're gonna talk a little bit about the liverworts, and I'm gonna, yeah. So the liverworts are, uh, okay, we have the liverworts that have, the leaves are in one plane. So they are flat, and you can find tallow liverwort and leafy liverworts. And the leafy liverworts have leaves in two sides like that. And they are usually, the color change from red or brownish to green. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now, because it's 8, if it's okay, I'm just gonna go to the next one. It's talking about the hornworts, and but yeah, you can go to the other one. Okay, these are examples of liverworts, and then the hornworts. And then let's go to the resources. Okay, and with that, so that if people have to leave, they can leave, and then we can continue. So for North America, there is a guide, there's an online guide of the genera of Bryophytes. So it's that website that Serenela is gonna give you the link later. And in there you can put the characters or like what you observe and try to figure out the species. There's a glossary of terms for identification. Okay, click the next one. There is also a guide to the mosses and liverworts of Illinois. There are posters, and here it tells you useful terms. For example, what is a sporophyte, what is the gametophyte, what are acrocarp, pleurocarp, and then how to look for them, where do they live, and some common species. So these are free resources that are online. Next. Okay, and then if you like books and you want some physical guide, these are two very good recommendations, mosses and liverworts and hornworts of the Northeast, a field guide to common bryophyte of the Northeast and common mosses of the Northeastern and Appalachian. And one of the pictures that I showed you of the leaves of bryophytes come from one of these guides. So these are really useful. Okay, next. Then there is this amazing, beautiful guide that came out recently, part of the North American Forest Atlas project. And you can get them online. You can buy this through their website. And they have beautiful pictures to identify them. So, and if you are interested in other aspects of bryophyte, okay, go. Then you, if you're more interested in, no, go back. So if you're more interested in gardening, there is a book about gardening moss. So you can grow moss in your backyard. And Annie Martin, she's been working on that. She's in North Carolina. She's been working with Bryophyte for a really long time. And then we have this beautiful book called Gathering Moss that is written by a Native American professor of botany and bryology, and she talks about all the aspects of bryophyte and mosses and the environment. So this is a really beautiful book. Okay, so next. Okay, and with that, I can close with the next one. Okay, show you another example of that guide. And with that, I will take any questions. And first, thank you. Yeah, this is an example of a chart that you can use. It shows you the habitat where they grow and the different species that they are. Okay, and thank you so much. And I'm really sorry about the internet. I'm sorry, but thank you so much. You've been wonderful. I loved all the questions.
Yeah, Amelia,
Thank you
that was wonderful.
so much.
We do have a few more questions that are coming in as you're finishing up. The first is, you mentioned that bryophytes with 20,000 species, they're the second largest group of plants. What's the largest group that has the most species?
The flowering plants.
Yeah.
The
All
flowering plants. So
many.
this is so we got 4 groups of plants: the flowering plants, the seed plants are the conifers, and then we have the ferns that are dispersed by spore, and then the bryophytes. So bryophyte.
And what animals would eat a bryophyte?
Ooh, that is a good question. For a long time we thought that they were not really edible, but moose eat them.
Mm-hmm.
And slugs eat them. Slugs actually love the capsules of mosses, and they are probably good dispersers of bryophyte. And then they are really other very small animals that eat them too. Birds use them for nests sometimes. Yeah, they're
That's
not
really
the
cool.
Yeah.
And I know in your second to last slide that had the resources, one of the books had a picture of all this moss growing on the roots of a tree. Is there any reason why they might particularly grow on the roots of trees, or is that just a random picture?
Yeah, I think bryophytes, what they do is they grow where they have space, where it's good for them to grow. So whenever they have a chance, a place to grow, they will grow there. So mostly what I think is that when a surface is available, they will use it, and nothing else will grow on top of a root, so they do it.
That makes sense. And I think we have 2 more. Does each bryophyte plant produce both an egg and a sperm cell?
Yes.
Okay.
So sometimes you can have them in separate plants. You can have male plants and female plants, and other plants you can have them together.
Okay. And I think that's the last one. And I know this might be region specific, but you might have some good ideas on maybe where to look. But are there good sources, like nurseries, for propagating native mosses in the garden?
Oh, yeah. So I know about Annie Martin, that she has a nursery in North Carolina, and she grows her moss, and she sells them and mail them. So she takes them, mail them to other people. I don't know. Yeah, it depends on the area where you are. For example, here in Puerto Rico, I don't know of any nursery that do it. And well, that comes also with another important thing, is that sphagnum sometimes is used to grow orchids or other plants, and not always they come from renewable sources. So an important thing when you're buying your moss, or if you're gonna collect moss from your backyard, to think about how sustainable it is gonna be. So there are some guides of, like, for example, if you want to put a little bit of moss inside your house and in some plants, to just take a little bit from the outside, and or the border of the patch, and then if you can also figure out a way of propagating it and bring it outside, that will be good too.
Oh, really cool. Maybe that could be one of the links that we share later to the North Carolina.
Yeah, and I know about it because we have like forums, and also there are classes about learning about bryophyte. So she's very active with the in the community. So I
That's
don't know
really
her
cool.
personally, but I've seen some of her work.
So we actually have one more, just real quick, and it's really just asking about the community science efforts in Puerto Rico and if that data is currently being used by scientists.
Nice, a great question. I right now with Bryophytes, we don't have a citizen science project yet, but I am looking forward to starting one. Uh, I've started collaborating with an organization called Para la Naturaleza. It's called For Nature, like
Mm,
F for Nature, and they do want to develop a way where citizens can go and measure and look at bryophytes. And I have to say that for lichens, there is a guide there where you can evaluate the forest or your backyard to see what are the most abundant ones.
that's really cool. All right. Thank you, Amelia. That is all the questions that we have for you.
Thank you. And
Thank you so much. Please, I would like the audience to join me in thanking you for a fabulous presentation. We enjoyed it so
Thank
much.
you very much.
thank you again. I'm very happy to be sharing this with you.
Thank you, Amelia.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.